Joe Biden has no plan. He's got absolutely no plan. He doesn't even know what the word inflation means. I don't think if you gave him a quiz, I think he should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Doc Ronnie Johnson, does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas? He was the White House doctor.
You know,
no, actually, they don't know him. They don't know
Ronnie Johnson. Who's Ronnie Johnson?
There's nothing like mocking
There's
your
Randy
opponent's
Johnson. He was
mental
a pitcher.
acuity and messing up the name of the doctor who actually administered your own cognitive test, who's sitting in the audience.
Person, man, woman, horse. Yeah. Ronnie Johnson.
The name of Trump's former White House physician turned U.S. congressman is Ronnie Jackson.
Wait, what?
Not Johnson.
What?
Good morning, and welcome to Morning Joe. It's
confusing.
Monday, June 17th. So what else is new, right? With us, we have NBC News national affairs analyst and a partner and chief political columnist at Puck, John Heilemann.
John Heinz, personal close
Pulitzer
friend of mine.
Prize-winning columnist and associate editor for The Washington Post, and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson, chief White House correspondent for The New York Times, Peter Paker, and the co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, also doing Way Too Early, also co-host Morning Mika, Simone Sanders Townsend. Thanks for all of you being in early on Monday morning.
So John Heilemann, I'm thinking, right. I'm not going to do this politics thing, but I'm guessing that if you're going to make fun of your opponent for being cognitively disconnected from facts and figures, it's probably good for you to not be disconnected cognitively from facts and figures as Donald Trump was this weekend.
Well, Jim, it's good to see you this morning here on Monday. Or is it Chuck? Chuck Scarborough? Wait, Jim Scarborough? No, Joe.
Exactly.
Joe Scarborough. Glass houses, man. You don't want to be throwing stones at... People who live in glass houses shouldn't be throwing stones. That's all I'll say about that.
Well, you know, and the thing is, too, it's getting really more obvious, Mika, that they have, the Trump campaign understands they have a serious problem with Donald Trump on facts, on issues, on you name it, because they have to keep engaging in cheap fakes to try to make Joe Biden look bad. And they did it this weekend. They've done it over the past several weeks. They've got the New York Post doing it, the RNC's doing it. All of these right-wing stooges on X are doing it. And if you have to make stuff up, you got to make stuff up. Obviously, you don't feel like you have a strong enough campaign to win outright.
No, I mean, they're grasping in many different ways, but I think that's just Trump being Trump, getting names wrong and getting information wrong, and I don't think he cares. Our top story...
Well, you know, I fear having a president like that. I really do, with storm clouds of World War II on the horizon.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, now to former Trump White House Communications Director Alyssa Farah Griffins saying former President Trump often discussed executing people at White House meetings. Speaking with Mediaite on Friday, Griffin highlighted an April interview from former Attorney General Bill Barr, where he was asked if he remembered a time when Trump called for a leaker to be executed. And here's what he told CNN.
Alyssa Farah Griffin, who was Trump's communications director, posted yesterday and said that you were present at a moment when Trump suggested executing the person who leaked information that he went to the White House bunker when those George Floyd protests were happening outside the White House. Do you remember that?
I remember him being very mad about that. I actually don't remember him saying executing, but I wouldn't dispute it. You know, I mean, it doesn't sound. The president would lose his temper and say things like that. I doubt he would have actually carried it out. I don't, you know.
But he would say that on other occasions. You said
the president, you know, the president had a. I think people sometimes took him too literally, and you know, he would say things like similar to that in occasions to blow off steam, but I wouldn't take him literally every time he did it.
Oh, you mean like he'll get rid of Roe? That's just blowing off steam. Griffin went further, saying Trump had called for executions multiple times.
And Bill Barr kind of danced, said, like, I don't recall that specific instance, but there were others where he talked about executing people. And I'm like, how you rationalize that is a person fit in sound judgment to be president of the United States. They're reading the tea leaves. They know there's a very real chance he's going to be president again. And there's not a lot of glory or like victory in being right, but being on the wrong side of Trump. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to.
So, Gene, let's get this right. The Attorney General of the United States heard the Commander-in-Chief calling for the execution of staff members.
Yeah.
And then when he is asked about it, after he's made clear that he is going to endorse for president the man who's calling for the execution of staff members, because I guess Barr is shocked and stunned by Joe Biden's student debt relief plan. That's where they always run to. Oh, well, if you think January 6th was bad and calling for the execution of staff members are bad, what about Joe Biden's 3-tier plan to relieve students of their debt, which they actually do. They actually, that's their go-to. You think January 6th was bad. But here we have a guy who's Attorney General, a lawyer. And I can just tell you, lawyers, I'm not even a good lawyer, but you get lawyers in conversations, they remember things. They have a dictaphone going in. They've got it going in their heads. And you hear something like that, you are trained for your mind to set that apart. Okay, the President of the United States just said we should execute staffers for leaking.
Yeah.
I mean, what Barr says is so laughable, and what Alyssa said is so chilling that we actually have Republicans, so scary, we actually have Republicans that are going to go out and endorse a guy who called for the execution of fellow staff members and then claims he doesn't remember it.
Yeah, I don't specifically remember that, but I won't deny it, right? I wouldn't say that I won't say that he didn't call for execution of staffers, because that's the sort of thing he did, right? That's the sort of thing he said. This is insane, right? I mean, step back for a second. We're talking about the President of the United States talking about how members of his staff should be executed for leaking information that he didn't want leaked, which was not national security information or anything. It's just something that he thinks is embarrassing to him. Absolutely unprecedented and insane, and we shouldn't, like a lot of things that Trump is saying now, we shouldn't just sort of walk past it and say, as Bill Barr said, oh, well, people are taking him too literally. Well, I'm sorry, but that's like the only way I know how to take people, right? I mean, I can't, when you say I want to execute that person, and you're the President of the United States, I have to take you literally. When you stand in front of a rally in Las Vegas and talk about, boats and electrocution and sharks, I have to take you literally. I don't know how to take it otherwise. This is a person who was elected President of the United States and who has a chance of being elected again. That should cause all of us to just to step back and think for a minute. This is not normal, and this is not acceptable or safe for the country.
Joe, Mika, I want to just think about it this way. Let's the most charitable interpretation of what Bill Barr is saying here, right, is something like the President of the United States on a regular basis would blow off steam. I think that was his phrase, right? Yeah, he would get mad. Right. And he would say things around the table like, let's imagine saying something like, not, I want to have this leaker found and executed. But let's imagine he's just blowing off steam. He's saying, if we could find that leaker, I'd like to take him out of the back of the White House on the South Lawn and have him shot. And let's say he wasn't being serious. Let's just say he was blowing off steam, right? as a matter of presidential temperament, is that the guy you want to have behind as the commander-in-chief, sitting in the Oval Office, a guy who, when he's frustrated, when he's blowing off steam, again, to use Barr's formulation, is someone whose way in which he exercises his frustration is to casually talk about having people who work for him shot, executed in some way. Well, I don't know if that's by hanging or by a guillotine or by the firing squad. I think it speaks to a temperament that is the kind of temperament that leads you to a president of the United States who, when your vice president is on Capitol Hill in the middle of a riot that you have incited, and the people at that riot are talking about lynching the vice president, your temperament, that person, that president is the kind of person who says, I'm not going to do anything to call off the mob that I incited. I'm just going to sit up here and let it play out. And I'm going to say quietly, according to at least some of the reporting that we've seen in some Capitol Hill, some stuff from the January 6th committee, was said, maybe our supporters have it right here. Maybe Mike Pence deserves this. Maybe he deserves to be killed, to be strung up on the Capitol grounds. I think, whether you don't have to get all the way to Donald Trump was ordering the execution of staffers to think that this is a very dangerous temperament and a very dangerous mindset to have, and one that shows an enormous lack of respect for the office, for the seriousness of the position, and as someone who is not in control of himself in a way that you would want a president to be.
But let's put this all in context, because you are right. When Donald Trump got the riot going on January 6th, as Lindsey Graham and as Kevin McCarthy said, he was responsible for these riots. Not only did he not call off the attackers when they were saying hang Mike Pence, not only did he tell staffers, according to their testimony, that maybe Mike Pence deserved hanging, he put out a tweet at a perilous time, which put Mike Pence in even more danger. He decided to do that. And Mika, these comments that we're now finding out that, again, that Barr's claiming he doesn't remember, you have to put these in proper context, too. This is a guy running for re-election in 2024, running to be president of the United States again in 2024, who has said the chairman of the Joint Chiefs needs to be executed, has had his lawyers argue he can execute political opponents with SEAL Team 6 and can't be charged criminally, who has talked about finding media companies guilty of treason, gelling them, has called for the immediate arrest of his political opponents. And we keep hearing it from his people. We heard it again this weekend from his people that anybody who opposes Trump's opponents need to be jailed. So this wasn't just one stray comment 5 years ago. This is active. It's ongoing. And because he is so craven to be, I guess, relevant, the former Attorney General of the United States is willing to go along for the ride.
Well, and your point is well taken. It is definitely well documented that there are really scary tendencies on the part of this former president. But even if anybody said something like that in jest or to blow off steam, in any situation, if it happened on the front porch of your house or if you said it on the show, it would be off-putting. It would be striking. People would think something was wrong with you.
For a president to say it in the Oval Office, talking about it, and for a guy who talks about executing political opponents and generals, it is relevant. It is to be taken literally.
So a new book out tomorrow is shedding light on how Donald Trump's time hosting the reality TV show, The Apprentice, cemented his image as a successful businessman and ultimately helped catapult him into the White House. In Apprentice in Wonderland, how Donald Trump and Mark Burnett took America through the looking glass. Author Ramin Satuda reveals the tricks Trump learned from starring in the reality show to get the voting public hooked on his Make America Great Again message. Satuda also shares several behind-the-scenes secrets, including how Trump was humiliated by his initial salary of $25,000 per episode. So he hatched a poorly received plan to become one of the richest men in television by asking for $6 million per episode, equal to the combined salary of the cast of Friends at the time. And the author of Apprentice in Wonderland, Ramin Satuda, joins us now. He's also co-editor-in-chief for Variety. It's great to have you on this morning.
You know, Ramin, it is so fascinating. You talk about this sort of Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass thing that was created by Trump and Burnett. I still remember business people in Manhattan just dying laughing at the prospect of Donald Trump being this great businessman when they all had stories about, you know, his bankruptcies or his failure to pay bills or you name it, his bad judgment as a business person. And yet TV made this reality true for millions of Americans, and Donald Trump has dined off of it since.
This is the story. This is the reason why Donald Trump became president of the United States. This is the reason why he is now the nominee and could become president of the United States again. And I think the important thing about this book, what I want everyone to know, is it's based on a lot of access to Donald Trump. I interviewed him starting in 2021. I, as a journalist, spent more time with him than any other journalist since he left the White House on the record. We talked a total of 6 times. We were sitting together in the boardroom at Trump Tower watching clips of The Apprentice together. And yes, this book is about the show and the warped reality that we all live in. But it's also a story about a president in exile, Donald Trump's mental temperament in the months after he left the White House, his desire for revenge, his fixation on famous people. Joe, he's actually very fixated still on you. He talked in very specific detail about an interview that you did in 2015 where Lawrence O'Donnell was questioning how much money he made off of The Apprentice. Most presidents post-presidency are thinking of happier thoughts or thinking of moving on with their life, but he was still remembering everything, every negative thing that anyone said. And this book is also a warning because Donald Trump knows how to use the media. He's never been taken out. People keep saying, okay, the Trump era is over, we're moving on. And he won't leave because he's a reality star. And it's very hard to move on from reality stars. They really know how to captivate their audience.
Yeah, Ramin.
Yeah, and by the way, really quickly, that's just a reminder. We don't do this so much anymore, but for a guy that never watches our show, hi, Donald. Maura, next question.
Yeah.
Well, like you, Joe, you know, I grew up in New York, actually. And so my memory is similar to Joe's memory of this show, which is kind of, you know, looking at this show and thinking, is this guy for real? I mean, I knew as a kid even that I knew about the bankruptcies. I knew about the Central Park 5 case. I knew that he was desperate to be an insider in New York society, but really was never an insider. Can you talk a little bit about actually what it is about the show that you think really resonated with so many Americans outside New York and led us to this point? What was it about The Apprentice and this idea that he had that seemed to make him relatable?
So The Apprentice premiered in 2004. At the time, I just moved to New York City. I was a reporter at Newsweek, and I started covering the show at the time. So I had a lot of insights into the show and a lot of access to Donald Trump going back 20 years. And so at the time, what was so groundbreaking about the show, there was Survivor, there was Fear Factor, there were a lot of reality TV shows, but they were always aimed at the lowest common denominator. The Apprentice positioned itself as smart reality TV. It was going to teach you about business. Everyone had a job. A lot of millennials, people in their 20s and 30s at the time, saw it as aspirational reality TV, where they could go on the show, they could show how smart they were, and then Donald Trump was the voice of judgment. He decided who was good, who was bad. He went in the boardroom, he hired someone, they could go work for his company and make $250,000 a year. It was seen as smart reality TV. And Donald Trump, because of the editing that he got, because of the way in which Mark Burnett, who created the show, portrayed him on The Apprentice, people started to think he was smart, he was funny, he was a good family man, and he was very good at business. And that image is the image that made him president of the United States. Those are the voters, the millions of people that watched The Apprentice for the 14 seasons that Donald Trump hosted it, that became his base.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it. I mean, you can look at The Apprentice. You can look at The Art of the Deal. I mean, as far as the branding goes, yeah, it's pretty extraordinary for where he ended up going. But I remember after The Apprentice came out, Mika, I remember, well, a couple of things. First of all, my son then at the time, who was 12 or something like that, you know, starts walking around the house going, "You're fired, you're fired." And I like, this is breaking through,
This is
number
definitely
one.
breaking through.
Number one. Number two, I remember driving around Lower Manhattan, cab driver, and I always interview people that are driving me around. "Hey, how you doing? Where are you from? What do you do? How, you know, when did you get to America? Whatever." And I remember one guy saying to me, he said, "You know, I'm driving a cab now. I've been doing this for 6 months. I'm going to save enough money. I'm going to buy a car. Then I'm going to get 2. Then I'm going to have 4. And one day I'm going to be just like Trump." And I sat there thinking, this is probably 2005, 2006. I was like, huh?
Yeah,
you know what? You talk about a brand resonating.
Yeah, for sure.
This really is.
And Ramin, I'm wondering if you've taken a look at, and you know, there's so many episodes, and I've also, you know, you hear rumblings about outtakes and what the fate of those are. I guess they're not legally gettable and seeable, but apparently there's a lot to learn about Donald Trump, not only in the episodes, but in the outtakes.
Well, he was Mike the entire time, and he loved being in the boardroom. It was his favorite part of the show. He didn't understand why he talked to me about how he didn't understand why there had to be all this extra stuff with the contestants. Not surprisingly, he just wanted the camera to be on himself. So the boardroom scenes would go on for, even though they were on TV, they were only 10 minutes, they'd go on for sometimes 3 or 4 hours. And he was Mike during all of that. And I asked him about the tape, the alleged tape that exists, where he allegedly said the N-word, and he denied it. Mark Burnett denied it. They said there's no bunker in which that tape exists. But that has been something that's followed him and persisted, and people have talked about. But the other thing that I think is really interesting, because I really got to know Donald Trump post-presidency, and I got to see what he was like. And over the weekend, he was talking about how Joe Biden needs to take a cognitive test. Joe Biden, you know, isn't all there. Donald Trump had severe memory issues. As the journalist who spent the most time with him, I have to say he couldn't remember things. He couldn't even remember me. We spent an hour together in 2021 in May, and then a few months later, I went back to the White House. I went back to Trump Tower to talk to him about his time in the White House, and he had this vacant look on his face, and I said, "Do you remember me?" And he said no. He had no recollection of our lengthy interview that we had, and he wasn't doing a lot of interviews at that time. So I think that the American public really needs to see this portrait of Donald Trump, because this shows what he is like and who he is and who he has always been.
But Ramin, I'm curious why you think he talked to you so much. I mean, it seems he loves the identity of being a TV star. I mean, that's self-evident. But why you? Why do you think he talked so much, and why do you think that his people were so willing to let you do it?
He was very excited to talk to me. He actually reached out to me when the book was announced. As the editor-in-chief of Variety, he has a lot of affection for Variety. He has the Variety ratings from The Apprentice framed up in his wall. He wanted to talk to me about show business. And he was really excited that someone was interested in going back and revisiting The Apprentice, because that is something that he has such fond memories of, and he was so excited about, and he was broadly loved when he was the host of The Apprentice. When he was the President of the United States, he wasn't, and he's very aware of that as someone who's savvy about his own media image. And so we kept extending the time. He was very pleased with our interviews. He really liked, when I showed him the opening theme song from the show, he lit up and was very, very happy. When he watched himself firing Omarosa, he lit up and he was very, very happy. And so we went back and visited key scenes on the show in Trump Tower, and it was the happiest he was. And then he would talk about being president, and he would become very gloomy and upset and resentful, and then he'd have his list of enemies.
I'm curious. I saw a headline on top of you while you were saying something. It said that that The Apprentice was Donald Trump's proudest achievement. Would you put that on par with him being elected president of the United States? The success in breaking through during The Apprentice, do you think that's what he's still the proudest of?
Absolutely. There's no question about that. That's from the Washington Post. They have an excerpt of the book today. And he said to me that he would go back and forth about whether or not he'd still be president without The Apprentice. A lot of people around him said he wouldn't have been president. And he told me that he didn't know if he would have run for president if it wasn't for The Apprentice. That is how important it was. I also talked to Eric Trump, who said it taught the family how to be public, how to be in the media. It taught their father how to react in debates. Those debates that, next week he's going to be debating Joe Biden, he's going to be using the tactics he learned in the boardroom when he'd be around celebrities or other contestants and undermine them and be funny and silly and ridiculous. And for whatever reason, it really works for him. And politically, if you're a politician, without that training, it's very hard to keep up.
Yeah, it's
The
fascinating.
new book is entitled Apprentice in Wonderland, How Donald Trump and Mark Burnett Took America Through the Looking Glass. And it goes on sale tomorrow. Ramin Satuda, thank you very much. Congratulations on the book, and thank you for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. The first presidential debate is 1 week from Thursday. The campaigns for President Biden and former President Trump have reached an agreement on the rules. The debate will be held on Thursday, June 27th in Atlanta, hosted by CNN. It will last 90 minutes and will include 2 commercial breaks. There will not be a live audience in the studio, and campaign staff will not be allowed to interact with the candidates. Both campaigns have agreed to allow microphones to be muted throughout the debate, only unmuting during the candidate's time to speak. Both candidates will also not be allowed any pre-written notes or props. They will be provided with a pad and paper. In a statement, CNN clarified the requirements to be allowed on the debate stage. All participating debaters must appear on a sufficient number of state ballots to reach the 270 electoral vote threshold to win the presidency, and receive at least 15% in 4 separate national polls of registered or likely voters that meet CNN standards for reporting. Of the non-major party candidates running, only Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a potential chance of meeting the requirements.
So, John Heilman, your take on the rules and who they seem to benefit?
Well, I guess my take on the rules, Joe, is that they're kind of all the important ones were pre-negotiated, and I don't want to. I know that there was, trying to hammer this out and get it all codified was an important thing, but these were. Putting aside the questions of duration, I don't think we knew 90 minutes versus 120. Some of these things, podiums and coin flips. The key elements here were the things that Biden and the Biden team and the Trump team agreed to before a month ago when they first announced this debate. The no live studio audience is still there. The muting of the mics. Those are the two I would say. Well, the rest of these things are relatively standard. Not the no written props, the notes and props things. These are all kind of things we'd seen before. I think Frank Fahrenkopf from the Commission on Presidential Debates noted over the weekend that what had been agreed to here was good, in the sense that he felt as though CNN and these agreed previously kind of preset agreements followed more or less down the path that the Commission on Presidential Debates has laid out. And those are kind of sensible rules. The one big difference here is this muting of the mics thing. And that is going to be the biggest difference. There's the biggest difference between what we saw in anything in the past. Never has been used in a presidential debate stage before. And I think there is a question, if you go back to 2020 and think about the disastrous first debate for Donald Trump, the fact that the mics were unmuted and that Trump was able to allowed to make kind of an ass of himself in that debate actually worked to Joe Biden's advantage politically. So there are some who wonder whether the muting of the mics will help or hurt. It's kind of it's Brave New World territory. You've never seen this before.
Well, it's like Al Gore's first debate with George W. Bush, the sighing, the moaning, all that actually also worked against his.
Do we know who is in charge of muting the mics? Is it the moderators or is it
I don't know.
Producer?
They better get it right. We've all seen debates at critical times where sometimes the moderators do an extraordinary job and sometimes they're just
run
abject failures and run over.
I mean, and that's the biggest question here is, will they be able to, if Trump is the kind of Trump we've seen in other debates, he has a tendency to run over moderators, just run them right over
Right.
and lie and lie and lie and lie and lie. And then the moderators give up and move on. And that's unacceptable.
It's a button. It's pretty easy to push.
Press it.
Let's hope they stick by the rules. Mark Leibovich, let's talk about the 800-pound elephant in the room. You are going to have two older candidates, both of whom each side claims is either not cogent or crazy. We've seen all of the cheap fakes of Joe Biden suggesting that he's out of it. And it's so fascinating. We haven't talked about it yet. I hope we get a chance to talk to Andrew this week about it. But Andrew Ross Sorkin talked to a lot of CEOs who were in that meeting with Donald Trump. Said the guy was just ranting and raving and rambling on and out of it and crazy. And as Andrew Ross Sorkin said, several of those CEOs who went in and were predisposed to support Trump left less supportive of Trump and more concerned, basically going, you're saying Joe Biden's bad? It can't be any worse than this. So it is going to be fascinating watching this debate. I think there are going to be a lot of people on both sides holding their breath for 90 minutes.
100%. Yeah, I mean, beginning probably with aides very close to the two candidates. I think it is fascinating. And I think the fact that they're going to shut off the mics is, I think, as John said, potentially, kind of a backhanded break for Donald Trump, because it was such a disaster in 2020. I think a corollary to that is, what's the cutaway going to look like? I mean, are we going to get to see exasperated expressions and sighing, which actually was quite hurtful to Al Gore in 2000, if you think about it. So is that going to supplant the interruption? Is that going to be kind of the other counterpoint that we're going to see in real time? So that should be fascinating also. But 90 minutes for people that age and people who, can sometimes, mangle all kinds of sentences and facts and so forth, especially Trump on facts, is going to be quite a challenge for the moderators. But also, I think it will be very fascinating to watch, because I think that we will get a pretty unfiltered view of what these two guys are like in a very high stakes situation over a long period of time. And I just want to say that Biden has outperformed expectations in these settings, several times, beginning with the last State of the Union address. So it will be fascinating to watch.
Al, we got the breaking news this weekend when Donald Trump spoke at a black church filled mainly with white people, that some of his best friends are black. What say you?
I say that I've probably all of my life heard every bigot I've ever talked to say that. That's usually their opening line, that some of my best friends are black. And you say that being defensive because it should be a given that you have friends that are black. The fact that you have to say it tells us that you really do have some biased tendencies, if not an outright bigot. I also think that it takes real effort to go to a black church and have mostly whites in the audience. I mean, in Detroit.
What is that?
I've never heard of that. I've been preaching all my life, and I've never seen a black church in Detroit where the majority of the people in the audience are white. And then you leave there and you go to a real right-wing conference which draws white supremacists. So I think Donald Trump more defined himself to black voters this weekend than he was able to appeal to them.
And to be clear, a black church full of white people is a black church full of white people.
Yes, it is. And to be clear, when Martin Luther King said the most segregated hour in America every week is the hour that people worship at church, well, he was foreseeing the white audience at Donald Trump's black church event.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Molly?
Yes, For sure. I mean, I think some of this is Trump trying to give a permission structure to try to prove or to pretend to more mainstream voters that he's not racist so that they will vote for him. I don't think that he actually believes, and again, the Rev can speak to this much better than I can, that he can actually win black voters.
No, I don't think he can win them. I think he's trying to get some on the margins, and he's trying to really appeal to independents and moderates that he's not racist. And then he lies. He says that black unemployment was low under him than any time in history. Black unemployment now under Joe Biden is lower than it's been at any point in history. During a pandemic that Donald Trump handled, black unemployment went up to like over 16%. And it was Donald Trump that caused the pandemic, and blacks took the brunt of that. So he should not remind blacks of our unemployment numbers under his presidency that really exacerbated the pandemic.
Yeah, a real mishandling mishandling of it.
Parents are struggling all over the country. I've spent time with thousands of parents over the last few years all over America, and the number one question they often ask me about is social media. They want to know, is this safe for my kids? How should I manage it? And what the data is telling us, Savannah, is not only have companies not demonstrated that their platforms are safe for kids, but there's growing evidence of harm. What has happened over the last nearly 2 decades that social media has been around is truly unconscionable when it comes to the health of our kids. We have allowed these platforms to exist, to evolve, to proliferate, to really occupy so much space in our children's lives. And our kids themselves are telling us about the mental health impact.
This morning, the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is calling on Congress to require a tobacco-style warning for visitors to social media platforms. In an op-ed to the New York Times, Murthy writes that the mental health crisis among young people is an urgent problem, with social media an important contributor. He continues, it's time to require a Surgeon General's warning label on social media platforms, stating that social media is associated with significant mental health harms for adolescents. A Surgeon General's warning label, which requires congressional action, would regularly remind parents and adolescents that social media has not been proved safe. So I think this seems like step one, but I don't know how it actually stops kids from doing something that is addictive. So that's going to be step 2 or 3, and I predict this ends up in the legal realm.
Well, you know, putting warning labels on cigarettes came after a long, long battle.
Right.
It came after the tobacco companies learned that their product killed Americans, lied about those studies, covered those studies up, continued selling cigarettes, and continued fighting any regulations. The same thing is happening.
It's very similar.
It's so similar.
It's killing kids.
Study
and adults.
after study after study shows that, especially for younger Americans, especially for younger women, but men as well, that social media platforms like Instagram causes anxiety, causes depression, causes suicidal ideation, and in tragic instances, suicide itself, increases bullying. You can go on and on. And Molly, the thing that is so where the parallels are really haunting comes to the studies, the industry studies that the tobacco companies did, where they knew cigarettes were killing their consumers and did nothing about it. Same thing happened with Facebook. They had studies that showed that that their product was causing anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, and in some instances, suicide. And they covered it up. And then when it was revealed, they lied about it. They tried to clean. I mean,
they don't let their kids on it.
And again, yes, you look at you talk to so many Silicon Valley tech leaders. They don't let their kids have screen time because they understand that it is the mental health equivalent of handing them a pack of cigarettes.
So I think tobacco is a great example here, and I might add oil companies too, right? Lying about the environmental effects of some, oil. But I definitely think you're right. And look, Congress has been really hesitant to regulate technology at all. And so we have things we desperately need, like greater algorithmic transparency. Nobody knows how these algorithms work. It's not clear. We know there's differences in the way, if you look at TikTok, there's differences in the way the algorithm works in China versus in the United States, what they point viewers to. And they've been really reticent to share any of that transparency. Congress has an opportunity here to step in, and they should. You have the Surgeon General literally begging them to. We need regulation. Mm-hmm. We need to protect our kids. And the reality is there is an opportunity here to steer readers to more verified news and not things that are made up, and Congress has not done it. And Congress could even save local news if they were more careful with making sure that these platforms link to verified sources.
Well, it's so fascinating. I'm talking about mental health. You brought up TikTok, which obviously impacts mental health, but it also impacts political debate. You have the Communist Chinese Party in control of a site that influences how young Americans think. And you have Donald Trump, because the American head are a big investor in the American affiliate of the Communist Chinese Party's holdings in TikTok, going to Donald Trump, asking him to support TikTok and oppose a ban. So, we're not only talking about mental health, but we're also talking about the political health of all Americans, and just asking the question. And again, you can put it back in sort of the 60s, 70s mindset. Would we really let the Communist Chinese Party control CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite? Would we really let them decide what scripts Cronkite would read for Americans to listen to? Because that's exactly what's happening on TikTok. And if you don't believe that, write something about Tiananmen Square and see how viral it gets.
Right.
Write something about the Uyghurs and see how much it picks up on TikTok. Write something about the oppression in Hong Kong and see how much lift it gets with the algorithms on TikTok. It won't, because, let me say it again, and this is just lunacy. People are going to look back in history and say, how could they let that happen?
That's right.
The Communist Chinese Party is controlling what news our children see on TikTok. And it's one of the most important sources. I want to get back to the mental health side of this story, though, Reverend Al, because studies have shown also that people of color, their children, are disproportionately impacted as well. Stay on these social media sites even longer. And it has a detrimental mental health impact on them. So this is also an issue of racial justice.
Certainly an issue of racial justice. When you look at the fact that there's the depiction and stereotyping and glorifying of a kind of street life that's synonymous with blacks, that's on a lot of these social media sites, and they're the ones that's pushed. When you even go to TikTok, as you mentioned, the kind of ways they malign those that are doing certain things in politics that would advance rights and kind of glorify others, and gives this stereotype that thug life and gangster life is synonymous with what real blackness is rather than excellence. And this mental health aspects really gives our young people a focus that they don't need. I mean, many of them look at TikTok and more than anything. So when you come and try to be rational, they say, well, you're part of the corporate media, not knowing they're part of the communist media. And I think that it is a danger to our country, and I think it's a danger to the mental health of our community.